In 1926, a Soviet scientist boarded a ship bound for West Africa with government funding, a team of assistants, and one goal: to inseminate apes with human sperm, and humans with ape sperm to create a brand new species. This isn't science fiction, it isn't a Cold War rumor. It happened, it was funded by the state, and for almost a century, almost nobody talked about it. This is the story of Ilya Ivanov, the man who tried to breed humanity's successor. Before he became one of history's strangest footnotes, Ivanov was respected, even celebrated. He was a pioneer of artificial insemination, and his work was no joke. He developed techniques that let a single stallion father offspring with hundreds of mares in a season, instead of the usual 2 or 3 dozen. For a country trying to rebuild its agriculture after war and revolution, that made him a national asset. He didn't stop with horses. Ivanov successfully crossbred a zebra and a donkey, producing what's called a zonkey. He bred rats with mice, antelope with cattle. To his colleagues, species boundaries weren't fixed laws of nature, they were obstacles waiting for the right technique. And in 1910, at a zoology conference in Austria, he floated an idea that would define the rest of his career. If you could cross a donkey and a zebra, why not a human and an ape? To understand why anyone funded this, you have to understand the Soviet Union in the 1920s. The revolution hadn't just overthrown a government, it had declared war on the natural order itself. If the state could remake society, why not remake biology too? Science was treated as a tool for engineering a better Soviet citizen, and a wave of scientists pitched increasingly radical ideas to a government hungry for breakthroughs that would prove socialism could outpace the capitalist world. Ivanov pitched his hybrid project as something practical, a hardier laborer, theoretically resistant to fatigue and disease, that could work in the harshest conditions the Soviet frontier could offer. The Academy of Sciences approved roughly $10,000 in funding, a substantial sum at the time, partly because Ivanov had a powerful ally backing him, physiologist Ivan Pavlov, the same Pavlov famous for his conditioning experiments on dogs. With state money and Pavlov's endorsement, Ivanov's strange idea from 1910 was no longer a thought experiment. It was a funded expedition. In 1926, Ivanov traveled to French Guinea in West Africa, at the time a French colonial territory, with permission to capture chimpanzees for his research. His son joined him on the trip. Over the following months, the team captured over a dozen chimpanzees, transporting them to a research station for what Ivanov hoped would be history's first successful human. Ape insemination. He inseminated 3 female chimpanzees with human sperm, donated according to the records by volunteer donors. He monitored them for any sign of pregnancy. All 3 attempts failed. There was no scandal in the failure itself. Interspecies hybridization rarely works on the first attempt, even with animals far more genetically similar than humans and chimpanzees. The real story is what Ivanov tried next. Back in the Soviet Union, Ivanov decided to attempt the reverse, inseminating human women with sperm from a male ape. This is where the story gets genuinely hard to research, because so few primary documents survived, and the ones that did paint Ivanov as remarkably casual about what he was proposing. He reportedly sought volunteers, and at least one woman, in surviving correspondence, expressed willingness to participate for the good of science. Whether any insemination attempt with a human subject was actually carried out is still debated by historians. What we know for certain is that Ivanov was actively planning it, had begun preparations at his research station in Sukhumi, in the Soviet Caucasus, and was only stopped because his last viable orangutan died before the procedure could take place. Read that again. A 1920s Soviet research program was one dead orangutan away from human trials. Here's where we need to slow down and separate fact from internet legend, because this story has been distorted for almost a century. The popular version claims Stalin personally ordered Ivanov to create an army of unstoppable ape soldiers, fearless, immune to pain, ready to conquer Europe. It's a great story. It is also, as far as historians have been able to verify through Soviet archives, almost certainly false. There's no documentary evidence Stalin was even aware of the project in detail. let alone that he envisioned a Humanzi army marching west. What actually happened is less cinematic, but in its own way more disturbing. This wasn't a dictator's personal obsession. It was an ordinary bureaucratically funded research program, approved through normal scientific channels, justified using the era's rhetoric about building a stronger Soviet worker. The horror isn't a mad dictator's fantasy. It's how unremarkable the decision-making looked on paper. Ivanov never got his second chance. In 1930, during a wave of Stalinist purges that swept through Soviet academic institutions, purges that had little to do with his hybrid research and everything to do with the era's political paranoia, Ivanov was arrested. He was sentenced to 5 years of exile in Alma-Ata, in present-day Kazakhstan. He never returned. He died there in 1932, reportedly of a stroke. Pavlov, his old ally, wrote his obituary. The institute Ivanov had worked from in Sukhumi continued operating for decades afterward, eventually becoming a primate research center used for entirely different, more conventional biomedical research, its origin story quietly left out of the brochure.